And I'm going to hand over now to Fereshte to introduce our speaker and the session tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ali, and thank you for colleagues in Kenya to join us this evening. I know it's very late and we all appreciate that you are here for another expert webinar for Block 7 actually. Today, I've got the pleasure to introduce Dr. Kerry Murphy. Dr. Murphy is a senior lecturer and a scientist with specialism in neurophysiology. He has led the development of on-screen tools to teach practical science based on the pioneering work of the Open University Open Science Lab. He has contextualized and adapted on-screen experiments for areas of the world where resources and physical infrastructures are limited. He is currently the STEM lead in the Open STEM Africa project, a collaboration between the Ministry of Education in Ghana and the Open University to support the teaching of practical science in senior high schools. Dr. Murphy has championed the use of on-screen technologies to teach practical science at the African University of Science and Technology in Abuja and developed an ODL capacity building program for African academics in Lagos in partnership with the British Council. He was also involved in the health education and training, a project to upskill health extension workers in Ethiopia. He recently represented the Open University at the Science for Refugee Conference organized by the European Commission. I know many of your projects are focusing on university capacity development projects are focusing on teaching STEM or practical subject. So I am sure that this session can support you a lot and probably inspire you for what you are doing for Skills for Prosperity. Without any further ado, I hand to Dr. Murphy to kick off the session. Thank you.
Fereshte, thank you so much for a lovely introduction. I shall now share my screen. So hopefully you can all hear me. And in a few moments, hopefully you can all see the screen. Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to share the story that the Open University has taken in developing experiential practical science applications to support the teaching of science at scale and also at a distance. And I think the key theme that will run through the whole of this presentation is that it's actually about harnessing technology. So, we started as a very small organization, but at the core of everything that we have done is to leverage the technology that is available and to be early adopters of new technology as it comes on stream. The Open University celebrated 50 years of its existence in 2019. However, at the very concept of university, before it was actually formulated in 1963, already the concept of technology played an absolutely central role in the development of the university. So I'm now going to play a short piece of video. This is Harold Wilson describing his vision for an open university in 1963.
The plans for the Open University were first outlined by Harold Wilson at the 1963 Labour Party conference in Scarborough.
And relevant also to these problems are our plans for a University of the Air. It's designed to provide an opportunity for those who, for one reason or another, have not been able to take advantages of higher education, now to do so, with all the TV and radio and the state-sponsored correspondence course and the facilities of a university for setting and marking papers and conducting examinations and awarding degrees that all these things can provide.
When he became Prime Minister in 1964, few people believed that a University of the Air was possible or even necessary, but he was determined to go ahead.
So, in 1969, the Open University, the University of the Air, was actually founded, and it worked by harnessing the technology that was available. Most households in the UK at that time had radios and televisions, and indeed, that's how we first started. So the Open University has always had a very warm and effective collaboration with the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC. And at the very start of our days as a university, we actually produced TV programs for broadcast. And here are two photographs showing the actual studios used on our campus to create that programming. Now, I remember as a young boy growing up, and I have to say, I lived in a remote island of the English Channel, nearer to France than to England. And so the television was our portal to the outside world. I remember being absolutely astonished by this range of programs produced by the Open University. However, unfortunately, it has established a certain folklore myth about academics who work for the Open University, such that most people think that when I tell them I'm an OU lecturer, they think that I wear a kipper tie and that I have long hair, or at least I have a wig hidden somewhere in my office. So this enduring image of an OU academic still exists today. However, our relationship with the BBC has evolved, it has changed. We no longer make programs that support our courses. Instead, what we do is that we create programming that is there to engage the public and to raise awareness. So I'm just going to share with you one program that I was involved with. This is about the human body, and Fereshti, I think, mentioned that I'm a neuroscientist. And the idea of these programs is, as I say, to raise awareness, but also to encourage the members of the public to come to the Open University and to explore how they could further their ongoing education and learning. So I'm now going to play a small promotional video of this, one of the programs. There were 3 in total.
We're living in an extraordinary time. We are able to explore the human body in a level of detail unimaginable even a few years ago.
It's a new age of exploration.
The remarkable journey from a single cell to the most complex organism on Earth, the human body on BBC Two.
So I'm fairly certain that you've all seen this slide before. I'm showing it because I just want to remind you that the Open University is the largest university in the United Kingdom. But the key thing here is that 6 to 1,000 of our students are actually studying STEM qualifications. So these students need to have access to practical science education. Now, one of the things I think that makes Open University quite different to other Open Universities around the world is that when we recruit staff, we recruit them based on their research profiles, their impact in terms of their research disciplines, in the hope that if you recruit talented researchers, that you'll be able to mentor them into being excellent distant educators. And so this gentleman up here in the corner at the top is actually me. I'm about to fabricate a microelectrode, and here you can see actually this is a slice of brain, and what I'm actually doing here is recording the electrical properties in that slice of brain. So this is a key thing about the Open University. But other thing I should mention is that because most universities in the United Kingdom are actually funded by the taxpayer, every 8 years or so, the government actually does an audit of research outputs to make sure that the taxpayer is getting value for money. And the most recent audit was actually released last week, and I'm pleased to share with you that the research outputs from the Open University, 82% of them were considered to be world leading and internationally excellent. So let me share with you the journey that we've taken over the last 50 years in developing approaches to support the teaching of practical science. So at the very beginning, it was very pragmatic. What we did was that we sent our students home experimental kits, and these were supported by radio and television broadcasts. And they came in a range of forms. So here you can see my favorite, a plastic brain, as this would be the case as I'm a neuroscientist. But here you can see there's a chemistry set. This gentleman here has a microscope and he's looking at slides. You name it. Anything that could possibly be sent to our students to actually allow them to conduct experiments at home, we did. However, as the university grew in size, we changed our approach. We started to rent out halls residence and laboratory space in universities, in other universities during the summer when they had no students on campus. And we used to run residential schools, and these tended to last for 6 days. They were quite intense. Students loved doing them. And we did this for several decades. But unfortunately, residential schools turned out in the long run not to be financially sustainable. And so we had to start thinking about other ways to support our students in terms of developing their practical skills. And so, as I mentioned before, one of the key things is it's harnessing technology as it comes along. And so the Open University was one of the earlier developers of on-screen interactive experiments. So initially this started, we would deliver these tools to our students on CDs and DVDs through the post. And as broadband connectivity in the UK improved, these would then be delivered to people's computers as deliverable content from the web. And today we are now entirely online. And the whole purpose of today's presentation is to share with you the sort of interactive screen experiments that we have developed. So about 12 years ago, we gave up, in the STEM faculty at least, we gave up, I should say, residential schools do work elsewhere in the university, but not in terms of, sadly, in science, because of just the cost involved in renting space. So, so what we have done over the last 12 years is that we have developed the Open Science Laboratory, which is a portal that contains almost over 300 applications to support the teaching of practical science. Now, before I actually unpack what I mean by this, I just need to share with you that the creation of an application to teach practical science isn't just the academic. It actually involves a team of people. So foremost, you need to have the academic vision. What is the purpose of the app? What is the app going to do? And then to make the app come to reality, you then need the support of a graphic artist, a videographer, photographers, a programmer to actually do the programming. But the most important person in the whole process isn't the academic, it's actually the project manager. This is a person who makes sure that all these people, the whole team, work together effectively to deliver the asset on time and to quality. So when most people think about how you create these applications, I think the last thing they think about, in fact, is that it involves a team. It can't be done by a single individual. So let me talk about these applications. So over the last 12, 15 years, we've now developed several types of application, and we know that they all work with our students, that they all support practical learning. So the simplest is, these are on-screen virtual instruments, and I will demonstrate one in a few moments. The second type of application are immersive laboratory experiences, and I'll also show you one of these. We also have applications that allow students access to very rare objects and allow them to manipulate these objects in 3D space. I will demonstrate one of these in terms of using skulls. And then, of course, we also have recently developed a whole suite of remote control applications where the students actually control instruments. And this is from telescopes to look at the heavens, all the way down to scanning electron microscopes. So we have developed means for students to actually access these tools and actually to do experiments, sat at their PC at home, but controlling these pieces of kit at a distance. Today, I won't talk about augmented reality or citizen science, but if you're interested, I do have a couple of slides I can show you at the end of the talk. So let me show you an example of a virtual instrument. Now, you probably guessed, because I'm a biologist, my favorite instrument on the planet is a microscope. And if that is your guess, then you are correct. So I must apologize for the hyperbole at the beginning of this video. This video was created for a different purpose. So do forgive my enthusiasm. So I shall now play this for you.
Welcome to the Open University's Open Science Laboratory, a suite of award-winning applications that are used to teach and to assess practical science using on-screen interactive experiments. In this video, I will demonstrate the virtual digital microscope. The digital microscope has everything you would expect to find on a microscope sitting in a laboratory. It has a series of objectives. It has focus control, both coarse and fine. It has lighting control. And also, it's possible to place a graticule or a grid so that you can measure or count the number of cells under the objective. The student then chooses a slide to examine. Today, we're going to look at a normal blood smear. So the slide is loaded, under the microscope, on the stage, and can be moved around, as you'll be able to do so with a microscope in a laboratory. So let's choose an objective. Let's go to times 10. So the first thing we have to do is to focus the image under the objective. I think that looks fairly reasonable. And also we can alter the lighting to improve the visualization of the image. Here you can already see that there is a mixture of different cell types. So let's go to times 20. Once again, let's make sure we're in focus. And here you can see very clearly that there are lots of red blood cells and the odd white blood cell. It's possible to move the image around under the objective, as you would with a normal microscope. So let's look at this image now at times 40. And here you can see very clearly we have red blood cells and white blood cells. So let's look for a good image of a white blood cell. Ah, yes, here we have one. So now I'm going to load a blood smear from an individual who suffers from sickle cell anemia. So let's go to times 40 immediately. And here you can see normal red blood cells, but occasionally there are red blood cells that are slightly abnormal, sickle looking. And these are the cells that are affected in sickle cell anemia.
So the next type of application that I'm going to share with you.
Welcome.
Oh, sorry.
To the Open University.
Forgive me. My computer has a mind of its own. So the next type of application that I'm going to share with you is an immersive laboratory experience. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't find a decent biological representation, though some exist, so I'm going to have to rely on chemistry. So if there are any chemists in the room, this is for you. Welcome to the Open University's Open Science Laboratory, which is a suite of award-winning applications designed to teach and assess practical science using interactive on-screen experiments. And in this video, I'm going to demonstrate the elementary flame test. This is a test that is used to determine the presence of metal ions based on the color that they produce when burnt in a hot flame. To conduct this experiment, the student uses a virtual laboratory consisting of a Bunsen burner, a nichrome sample wire, and a spectrophotometer. The first thing the student has to do is to switch on the gas and then ignite the Bunsen burner. Having ignited the Bunsen burner, the student then changes the gas-air mixture so that the flame burns as a hot blue flame. The nichrome wire is first washed to make sure that it is clean and not contaminated. It is then loaded with a sample solution, in this case copper sulfate, which is then introduced into the flame. And here you can see it burns with its characteristic blue color. The student can also use a spectrophotometer to actually look at the light spectrum emitted by the copper sulfate solution when burnt in a flame. So let's load up our wire once again with a fresh sample of copper sulfate and introduce it into the flame. And here you can see the light spectrum emitted by this reaction. So what would happen if we now change the sample? In this case, let's use a sample containing lithium. The lithium is then presented to the flame, and here you can see it burns with a red color and also has a very different light spectrum associated with it. So by using a virtual laboratory like this, students can characterize the light spectrum and the flame color of a variety of different metal ions. And then based on that understanding, they can then test one of two unknown samples. So just out of interest, let's see what is in sample 1. Based on the color of the flame and the light spectrum, I think this is a sample that contains copper ions. What do you think? So the third type of application that I'm going to demonstrate is the manipulation of an object in 3D space. And the beauty of this approach, as I think I mentioned before, is that we can give our students access to really rare objects, or objects that normally they wouldn't come in contact with because they're just far too expensive. So in this case, I'm going to share with you a video which looks at hominid skulls.
Welcome to the Open University's Open Science Laboratory.
I do apologize for the hyperbole.
Of award-winning applications that have been designed to teach and assess practical science using on-screen interactive experiments. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how students can investigate human evolution by examining hominid skulls. Here you can see the skull of a modern human, Homo sapiens. The students can orientate the skull in 3D space. They also can examine the skull using one of a series of standard anatomical positions, such as the right side view or the normal anatomical position. The application also allows students to make measurements. So here we can measure the orbit of the eye by placing the cursors in the correct position, and here you can see the orbit is 41 centimeters. Students can also compare different hominid skulls. So here we can see the modern human skull, and on the right the skull of Homo habilis, which you can see is considerably smaller than that of a modern human. At the end of the activity, the students are then asked to place the 6 skulls that they have examined in chronological order. So I'm fairly certain that A is modern humans, Homo sapiens, that F is Neanderthal, C is Homo erectus, I know that E is going to be Homo habilis, and I think that these two are also in the correct order, so let's check. Excellent.
And the fourth type of application I'm going to share with you is the use of remote experiments. Now, this is done in a slightly different way. I'm going to share a short video that was put together by the dean of my faculty, who has been one of the key drivers behind this approach to practical science education. So let's just play the video and see what happens.
A laboratory is a space for learning by doing and reflection, a place for experiential learning. We've got a laboratory for you that's accessible no matter how far away you are. We'll give you a connection to an internet of laboratory things, where authentic interfaces will link you to real data. It's a place for collaborative working, and it's open all hours.
Now, the one thing that connects these 4 types of application that I've just shared with you is that they're authentic. They're based on real data. And we know from experience that in order for students to engage with these type of applications, to feel that they actually have value, they need to be relevant and they need to be authentic. They need to be based on the physical world around us. And this has been a key part of our learning journey. So at the moment, everything that we do is all about creating an authentic experience for our students. And this then leads me on very nicely to the second part of my presentation, which is to talk about the work that we have done with the Ministry of Education in Ghana as part of the OpenSTEM Africa project. And once again, this is all about creating authentic experiences for senior high school students in Ghana. Now, before I show you some of the applications that have been produced and the process that we use to create them, I think I need to tell you a little about the background of this project. So about 7-8 years ago, the Ghanaian Ministry of Education launched its Secondary Education Improvement project, and this was very much focused on using technology-based learning approaches to actually support the teaching in those schools that were seen as being low performing or low resource or in the underserved districts. And 148 schools were actually identified, and the solution to this problem was to create, I should say these schools also had limited or no connectivity to the internet. So the solution to this problem was to create something called the iBox. And now this was funded by the World Bank, and this was very much led by a government agency in Ghana called the Center for National Distance Learning Open Schooling, CENDLOS. And they designed, created, and built this iBox in Ghana. And then working with a team of senior high school teachers, they created content that actually supported the 4 compulsory subjects that every senior high school student in Ghana has to take. And this is maths, integrated science, English, and social studies. So these iBoxes are wired into the ICT laboratory in each of these schools. And they also have Wi-Fi connectivity. So anybody with a Wi-Fi enabled device is able to access the content, and anybody in the ICT lab is able to access the content. And this has been now, it's in more than over 100. When we last talked to the team in Ghana, I think the iBoxes are now in over 200 schools, and they have been a great success. However, the one thing that they didn't do was actually support STEM subjects. So another core strand within the Secondary Education Improvement Project was to try increase the number of students choosing to study STEM subjects. At the moment in Ghana, it's about 40%. Ideally, the government would like to see this closer to 60%. And another key strand is to try and encourage many more girls and young women to actually engage with STEM subjects and then to go on to university and enroll in STEM qualifications. Now, this is when the Ghanaian Ministry of Education, CENDLOS, and the Ghanaian Educational Service actually then reached out to us to actually work with them to create content for the iBox to support the teaching of physics, chemistry, and biology. And this is the nutshell of the project. So to enable this to happen in 2019, and the dates here are quite critical, as I'm sure you're all aware, in 2019, we ran a series of co-design workshops with senior high school science teachers in Ghana. And the first one was as a webinar, but the second one was face-to-face, and this is in July. And these workshops really nailed what do we need in terms of a lesson? What do we need in terms of practical on-screen application? How can we support the teaching of practical science in these low resource schools, where quite often the laboratory resources just don't exist, or the teachers are so overworked because they had an increase in student numbers enrolling, that a lot of these things are taught more as a theory than as a practical experience. And of course, we also considered issues around career professional development, particularly in service career development, leadership within schools, and also importantly, gender. So as a result of that workshop, we identified 12 areas where on-screen interactive experiments could support the teaching of practical science in schools with an iBox. So in October, in 2019, we returned to Ghana for a second face-to-face workshop. And here we then focused on actually storyboarding what these applications would look like. So the storyboarding process is really important. This is the academic vision. This is where you think about, what are you trying to achieve? What are the learning outcomes? How will students interface with this application? And what will the outputs be of this application? And how will the students then use those outputs to actually conclude their experiments? So here we have a photograph of 2 of the physicists on our team, Charles and Gideon, and they worked together to create a storyboard for the spring maths system. Now, we went back to the UK in October, and of course we all know what happened in the year 2020. COVID sadly affected us all. But nonetheless, we were able to continue working remotely with our teams in Ghana to actually create these assets. So what I'm going to share with you now is actually the asset that was co-created with the senior high school teachers and the team at the Open University in the UK. So hopefully this will now play. I should say the next couple of videos I'm going to show you have been voiced by Lois Dempsey. Lois is a Ghanaian PhD student at the Open University. She's doing a PhD in physics. She's also a superstar in Ghana because she was part of a student team that was involved in a quiz with their lecturers, and I think this was televised, and they won. And so her voice is very well known, and we were really pleased that she agreed to voice these videos for us.
Springs are an important component in many mechanical devices. From the propelling mechanism used by a simple mechanical pencil, the source of an energy storage in a wind-up clock, and as shock absorbers in the suspension of trucks and trains. The springs used for each of these purposes have different properties in terms of their elasticity and stiffness. The amount of force required to deform a spring depends on its stiffness, a property determined by the force constant of the spring, a constant determined by Hooke's law. Here, F is the force applied to the spring. X is the distance the spring is displaced from its resting or relaxed position by the applied force. And K is the spring force constant. So if you know the force applied to a given spring and how far it is displaced by that force, then it is possible to calculate the force constant for that spring. The force constant for a spring can be determined using a spring mass system, such as the one shown here. An oscillating spring will eventually come to a stop. This is because of the force due to the acceleration of gravity, and the spring mass system can also be used to calculate this characteristic of gravity. The spring mass system app can be used to explore the properties of a variety of springs. The first part of the app can be used to determine the force constant of 3 springs with different level of stiffness: a stiff spring, a medium spring, and a soft spring. This is done by applying a weight, say 50 grams, and measuring the extension produced. If you wish, you can record your data in a table which can be exported as a spreadsheet file at the end of the experiment, or simply record your results in your lab book. The process is repeated by adding more weights to the weight holder. To return to the home page, click on the blue icon at the top left of the screen. The force due to the acceleration of gravity and the force constant of a spring can also be determined by the simple harmonic oscillations of a spring. The second part of the app allows you to explore these harmonic properties. You have the choice of a stiff or soft spring. Again, a weight is applied to the spring, and once it has settled down, a force is applied by pulling the spring downwards and letting it go. In this example, the oscillations of the spring stops after the 10th oscillation so that the time and the applied extension can be recorded. It is possible to repeat this experiment by applying a force in the opposite direction. You can also choose 20 oscillations or allow the spring to oscillate freely as it's willed in a physical laboratory.
So the second video I'm going to show you is actually one of the applications that was created by the chemists. And this is all about the burning of food and measuring the energy content in that food. I don't know if you're aware, but today it was reported in newspapers that by 2040 in the United Kingdom, 42 million people will be obese if we don't change our approach to consuming food. So knowing the energy within food is critically important. And this app will show you, this video will show you how you can use this app to actually calculate that energy.
Food calorimeters are used to measure the energy stored in a food sample. And the energy released by burning the food depends on the combination of nutrients in the sample. This video will show you how to use a simple food calorimeter in a virtual laboratory to measure the energy in different foods. You'll be able to determine the number of calories per gram in a food sample by measuring the heat transferred to a fixed volume of water when burning the food in a combustion chamber under an oxygen atmosphere. On the bench, you have all the equipment and chemicals needed for this experiment. Once you start the experiment, you will be able to choose a food sample using a drop-down menu. For the purposes of this demonstration, we will select a coconut peanut. Your first task is to weigh the crucible containing your selected food. This initial mass should be recorded in your laboratory notebook. The crucible containing the food is then placed onto the movable support on the base of the calorimeter. Next, you will move the empty glass water jacket onto the base of the calorimeter, forming the combustion chamber around your food sample. Note that the manual stirrer is already inside the glass vessel. The glass vessel is now filled with 1 liter of water. Once the water is transferred, the application will complete some steps of the food calorimeter assembly for you. The lid is placed on water jacket and the oxygen source and water jet vacuum pump are connected to the inlet and outlet of the combustion chamber. Next, you will fit the temperature probe through the lid of the glass vessel by turning on the temperature display. At this point, you will take a temperature reading of the water before the start of the experiment. Remember to stir the water to ensure a uniform temperature throughout the glass vessel and record the initial temperature value in your laboratory notebook. Now, you're ready to open the tap to start the vacuum jet vacuum pump. This ensures the suction of the gases out of the chamber. After this, it is now safe to open the regulator valve of the oxygen cylinder. Clicking on the crucible support handle will move the food closer to the igniter coil. When you turn on the low voltage power supply, electric current will flow through igniter coil. At this point, a video will start playing showing the combustion of your selected food. When the coil gets hot, it ignites the food and the oxygen flowing inside the combustion chamber ensures the food continues burning. The gases produced by the combustion of the food passes through the copper spiral tube and heats the water inside the glass vessel. The application will turn off the power supply for you as soon as the food sample starts burning, and the crucible will also be moved back to its original position. While the video is playing, the calorimeter is in lockdown mode and you cannot change any settings. Immediately after the flame extinguishes and the video finishes, you will stir the water and record the final temperature of the water after the combustion of your selected food.
Okay, I shall now move on to the final video that I'm going to share with you. So one of the things, and I have to say this was quite unexpected, but one of the things that came out of our workshops is that the biology syllabus in Ghana actually expects students to go on several field trips. But in reality, because of logistical issues, these just didn't happen. Instead, the teachers came up with really innovative ways of actually giving students a similar experience by growing vegetables or flowers in the schools of in the grounds of the school. So we thought that we would actually try and create a virtual field trip that would meet serve the needs of the biology syllabus. And the biology teachers told us that it had to do 4 things, and they created storyboards for each of these. And the first was that students should be able to go out there and observe and make observations about the environment. The second storyboard was all about classifying what they see. The third was more technical, it was about taxonomy, and the fourth was actually more demanding in the sense that the students actually had to collect data and do some analysis. So we took those storyboards back to the UK, and we were planning to return to Ghana in March 2020. And of course, that couldn't happen because the United Kingdom and Ghana both went into lockdown. Now, we were going to be supported by the University of Ghana in terms of collecting data and imagery for this trip in March, the abandoned trip. So what we did instead was that we spoke to our colleagues at the University of Ghana who were locked down on campus. And it just so happened that next to the campus, there was actually a set of botanical gardens, university gardens. And so working in a safe way, our colleagues at the University of Ghana were able to go into the botanical gardens and actually collect data and imagery for us so that we could actually compile this virtual field trip. Now, of all of the applications we produced, there are a fair number, and I will share a screenshot of the virtual laboratory with you later in this presentation. This, by far, I think, is one of the most impressive apps we produced, because this is a template, but I'm sure when you watch it, you can see how it could be used to actually give students, exposure to locations and environments throughout the globe. So that is the plan, that we will actually add more locations to this. So without any delay, I shall now play.
Welcome to this video tour of the virtual field trip. These on-screen interactive applications allow you to explore different environments, see some of the plants and animals found in various locations, and discover more about them. To enter the virtual field trip, click on the country you wish to explore. In this version of the virtual field trip, we have 2 locations in Ghana, a country located in West Africa. Let's explore the Legon Botanical Gardens in the capital city, Accra. The location opens with an overview of the field site, which can be explored in a number of different ways. For example, you can choose to take a drone flight to observe the site from the air. At the Legon Botanical Gardens, you have a choice of several flight paths. Let's look at the drone flight that flies over the dam site at the Botanical Gardens. Another way that you can explore the site is to view a panorama. Once again, you have several to choose from. The panorama provides a 360-degree vista containing photos and videos of the species of interest. Before we examine some of the species found in this panorama in more detail, let's first look at the navigation controls. You can use the arrow keys to move sideways, to move up and down. You can zoom in using the plus key on your keyboard and zoom out using the minus key. You can also use the on-screen tools to zoom in and out. Finally, you can also click and drag with your mouse to move around the panorama and use the scroller to zoom in and out. Let's now look more closely at this tree by clicking on the photograph icon. This is a silk cotton tree. You can learn more about it by clicking on the field guide icon, which includes a description of the tree and a close-up image. There are also videos of some of the plants and animals found in this location. Let's explore further by clicking on this video icon. Here we have a termite mound. And what is lurking in this palm tree? Oh wow, it's a western green mamba. Once again, you can learn more about it by clicking on the field guide icon. The panorama also allows you to look skywards. And here you can see a yellow-billed kite. When exploring the field site, remember to make notes in your notebook about the species you find. All the species found in the field site are included in the field guide. You can find out more information about each one and where they are found. You can also look at the taxonomy for each species. Here is the entry for the African grey parrots. A taxonomy and a close-up of this beautiful bird. Finally, there is also an exercise for you to carry out, sampling the vegetation. At the Legon Botanical Gardens, there are 2 areas where you can carry out this exercise. The vegetation in each area has been sampled using a quadrant. Click on the magnifying glass to look at the quadrant in more detail and explore the plants found within it. Good luck with your investigations.
Now, that application, the virtual field trip, was actually created remotely. It involved a phenomenal degree of project management because there were so many people involved. The complexities with just getting data moved from one country to the other, but the team worked together to deliver it. And I have to say, I'm hugely impressed because it's an astonishing piece of work under what were very difficult circumstances. So before I share with you opportunities to actually just for yourselves to go and actually look at these applications. Another key part of the Open South Africa program is to provide materials to support the continuing professional development of teachers. Absolutely absolutely central when sort of transitioning from a more traditional approach to practical science to a more technology-based solution, and also a leadership program to help the heads of science and heads of school to actually manage this change. And also we've created, together with our colleagues in Ghana, a series of exemplar lessons which show how these applications can be used in the classroom. So not only do they contain the lesson, they also have teacher notes to help them actually organize their classrooms and also to have a sense what the likely outputs are going to be. So, as I said, I'd like to invite you all to visit the Open Science Laboratory and the Open South Africa Virtual Laboratory. You could do that by simply putting these terms into Google and hopefully you will get a link to it. Also, we have created all the videos I've shown you, plus many more, are available on the Open South Africa YouTube channel. So please do make use of these resources if you'd like to learn more about them. And please don't hesitate to contact me if you'd like to discuss some of these some of these applications in detail. I should say that everything that is in the Open South Africa Virtual Laboratory is an open educational resource. So it is there for you to use. So please don't be shy to come forward. Now, okay, I can see you're probably sitting there thinking, well, actually, virtual experiments cannot replace hands-on experience in a physical laboratory. And this is a tension that exists in the UK. We have people who are completely, you can only ever become a scientist if you have hands-on experience in a lab. There are others that say, well, actually, virtual approaches are almost as good and perhaps more reliable, better. And of course, there's the hybrid approach. And so in the United Kingdom, the Royal Society of Chemistry accredits chemistry degrees for universities, and the Royal Society of Biology accredits biology degrees. And the tensions that exist between this hands-on approach and this virtual vision are very, very evident between these two societies. So the Royal Society of Chemistry absolutely says in its accreditation documentation that in order to be accredited, you have to have at least 300 hours of timetabled laboratory practicals in a physical laboratory. And that doesn't include project work either. However, that was their view before the pandemic. The pandemic has changed everything, and there are now tensions within the society, so that I think at some point in the future they will be more open to virtual approaches. But for the moment, it means that the degrees that we offer at the Open University won't be accredited by the Royal Society of Chemistry because we can't offer 300 hours of timetable practical experience. However, the Royal Society of Biology has taken a completely different view. They went out to ask stakeholders and potential employers of biology graduates, what do you expect from the graduates that enter your businesses and whatnot? And they came back and said, actually, universities are not providing students with the sort of skills that we need. The laboratory skills that universities teach are outdated, and that actually most companies, particularly biotech companies, have to retrain and reskill their fresh graduate intake. What they said, what was more important, was actually what the students needed to be able to do was actually know how to handle data, how to organize it and analyze that data, how to interpret and communicate their findings, and absolutely what was key was to be somebody who was able to work within a team environment. Now, the Open University degree offers all of those experiences, and so as a result, our biology degree has been accredited by the Royal Society of Biology. Now, I should say that pretty much everything that the students do is done virtually in this degree pathway. There are some opportunities to do field trips for students who are doing more ecology, environmental type approaches, but by and large, everything is done virtually. So it is possible to get degrees accredited if you go down that route. Now, I was going to spend a few moments talking about how the university dealt with the pandemic in terms of online support of students. I don't think we have time for that. So what I'm going to do is just skip to my last slide. So I'd like to thank you all for your participation, and I'm very happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Murphy. That was fantastic, and lots of really fantastic to see those different applications and lots of ideas as well in those, I think, which people will find really useful. I can see there's some really positive...
Can I just ask, so it's one thing I should have mentioned, and I'm sorry for interrupting, is so in 2019, everything in terms of the Open Some Africa project, everything was geared around the iBox. Everything was focused on those low resource schools that had these iBoxes in place. But of course, the pandemic has changed everything. And all of the content that we've co-created with our colleagues in Ghana is soon to be launched on iCampus Ghana, which is the portal used by SendLoss, which is an internet portal. So it will be available to every student in Ghana who has access to that resource, which is about 1 million students. So, you know, as a result of the pandemic, you know, there's been a transformational change in how people think about the use of virtual experiments to support practical science. So that has been a huge ground shift for us in this project.